is the Fox 13 5 o'clock news.
Good evening, Lexington. We're back here in election headquarters to go over the results of the 2010 Senate elections that sent the Tea Party to Washington. Let's begin by breaking down some numbers. If you take the margin of victory for Jim Bunning's last two elections and the last race for Mitch McConnell, you'll find the total percentage point margin to be 7.85. That's less than the margin of victory for Rand Paul in these past elections and consequently higher than our ratings on election night. Let's see how this happened.
Thanks, Armin. Rand Paul was able to gain leverage on Conway in many of the state and national issues to win by a huge margin. He will be taking over for Jim Bunning, a Republican senator of 12 years. Usually when a senator retires, we find that the candidate of the same party loses votes, exhibiting a phenomenon we call retirement slump. Oddly, in this case, the retirement slump was -4 points. We think that this is due to a number of factors, including Rand Paul's ability to ride the national Tea Party movement, Bunning's lack of success due to sex scandals made public before the 2004 election, and more recently, negative publicity Conway received due to his attacks on Rand Paul's alleged religious beliefs. Speaking of the latter attacks, let's cut to a clip of the debate where this was discussed at length.
When is it ever a good idea to tie up a woman and ask her to kneel before a false idol, your god that you call Aqua Buddha?
You're accusing me of crimes. How ridiculous are you?
The somewhat absurd tactic shown here even manifested itself in a fairly controversial commercial trying to rally anti-Paul sentiment among voters. In the end, Conway's attempt to turn voters backfired. One Kentucky citizen who'd even voted for Obama in 2008 went as far as to say, "The ad's pushing me towards Rand Paul. It's such a personal attack, and he did it because Rand Paul had a lead in this race. Conway's desperate." Now for the national perspective on this race and its implications, we're going to go to Christian.
Thanks, Patrick. There are more registered Democrats in Kentucky than Republicans, so you might expect them to elect Democrats. But most are conservative Democrats, and the state tends to vote Republican in federal elections. Also, Paul was able to overcome his lack of qualifications as a quality candidate by relying on some of his father's name recognition as a multiple-term U.S. House member and by riding a wave of Tea Party support. Paul successfully nationalized the race, criticizing President Obama and Democratic congressional leaders at every turn without even mentioning Conway many times. He did not run against Conway, but more against Obama, and he had this in common with many successful Republicans in this election. The polls leading up to the election reflected this, only showing a 3% difference than the actual election results. This reflects the national results, which showed a 3.5% difference in interesting races, and also the continued accuracy of the polls, even though most are conducted over landline phones, with many people choosing to only have a cell phone these days. It was the most important voters, independents or median voters, who made the difference on election day. Independents favored Republicans by 55 to 40% in the national exit polls. In this election, we can see some of the recent trends in the shifting of party constituencies. With that, I'll pass it back to you, Armin.
Will Paul be able to hold his seat for terms to come, and will Kentucky become a Republican stronghold? Come back in 2014 for our coverage of the Senate elections. Good night, Lexington.